Happy Friday, everyone. Josh's severe weather, and I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'm glad to be back on with you today. We're going to be talking about wintry temperatures and some brutal snow coming for those of us in the lake effect zones here of the Great Lakes, and another storm as well, which will be heading into Missouri and tracking into parts of the Ohio and Tennessee valleys here over the weekend. And some of that could produce some decent snow with this colder air that's in place. So I appreciate y'all joining me this afternoon here as we get through the holidays. It was brutal this morning getting back into the gym, but I definitely feel better. And just, I think showing up is really most of the battle. And I hope you all get a chance to get some fresh air before it gets too cold out there as well. So I'm a meteorologist in the Raleigh area. It's a mouthful, believe it or not. And been on here for a couple of years, coming up on my 2-year anniversary on YouTube. And I appreciate you all for sticking with me here through the good and the bad here of hurricane season, severe weather season, and now as we head towards what's going to be a pretty brutal start to the month of December. So I do want to touch on the tropics real quick. We still have another day or so to go here of the season. Nothing going to form, but we are tracking this area of disturbed weather here to the south and west of Jamaica. And the reason I bring this up is I know a lot of folks are planning to do some travel, getting in on some of those pre-holiday deals still, and we are going to deal with a lot of wet weather and unsettled weather across this region, but we are not going to have another named storm, not out of this area. The wind shear is a little bit too high. So for the time being, wet weather across Jamaica, portions of Haiti, and as we head into next week, it'll get wetter across Central America to the point where we have to be concerned about flooding once again in Honduras and southern Belize and Guatemala. And in particular, I'm worried about Costa Rica, Northwest Panama, and the east coast of Nicaragua here. You can see over the next week, the potential is there for over 3 feet of rain in a few locations. In Jamaica, it might be closer to 6 inches. Areas of northern Honduras, which got hit hard by Sarah a few weeks ago, are at risk of seeing at least 4 inches of rain and perhaps a foot of rain, depending on where you are. So we'll keep tracking that for you, even though the focus now shifts to the U.S. and what's coming winter-wise. And you can see here just a massive trough across the eastern U.S., big upper level low spinning across northern Ontario. This is going to keep our storm track limited to the south, but it is going to bring much colder air over those relatively warm Great Lakes. So we are going to see some pretty intense amounts of snow here off of Superior, even worse off of Erie and off of parts of Ontario and parts of Michigan as well. And this is not unheard of, but for those of you that had such a warm November, this is going to hit hard and will cripple some locations where you're going to be stuck in your houses for at least the next several days as we track that. Now, across the southern United States, we do have a little bit of a disturbance here, bringing some moisture into Florida. No severe weather expected with that. Until that clears, it will stay somewhat moist in central and south Florida, but once that finally makes its way out late in the weekend into next week, you will also see that cold air coming down into Florida. It's just going to take a little bit longer. In the southwest, we are going to see this big upper level low sending some cloud cover, some moisture up and over a ridge of high pressure. So we'll have a return to milder, more humid and moist air in place later next week across Texas, portions of the southwest. But for the majority of the country, I wouldn't call this a quiet, sleepy weather pattern. We're definitely going to see a lot of snow, but we are going to shut down the big storm systems, at least for the next week or so. After that, things could get a little bit more interesting. You can see here we have winter storm warnings in pink. Not shown on here are lake effect snow warnings, but those are in effect in the snow belt regions of New York, PA, Ohio, and upper Michigan. And we do have freeze watches and warnings in effect for parts of the deep south, heading from the Piney Woods region of Texas right across South Alabama and Georgia and into the Carolinas. We got down to 32 at my house today in Raleigh, but expecting 20s for several nights here coming up, as it truly feels like winter. Now, what makes this brutal is not the fact that we're in the 20s, but the fact that we're going to go at least a 10-day stretch below average. And that's something we have not really seen here over recent winters. We've had cold shots before, but we haven't had persistent cold. And that's going to just, shoot your heat bill up here for the month of December. Even all the way down to the Gulf states, we're going to see much below average temperatures persisting here over the next couple of weeks. So we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. Let's take a look at the lake effect snow that we're going to be dealing with. You see the streamers on here from the NAM model. They're persistent. And I'm going to show you some totals in a little bit. Below this, we do have a disturbance that's going to move into Missouri early in the day tomorrow, and that's going to produce some heavier snow in places like Columbia and Jefferson City and Kansas City. It will stretch into St. Louis in the afternoon, then track across southern Illinois and Indiana late in the day, and then move into Kentucky and southern Ohio as we head towards the evening tomorrow night. We are going to pick up some snow out of this. When it reaches the mountains, though, it does fall apart when we get into Sunday morning. So once you get east of places like Beckley and Elkins, it's pretty much shutting down by the time we get to Sunday morning. But what's not shutting down is this lake effect. And we're going to break down some of those totals here to come in this video. Looking at the Northeast, we say goodbye to our winter storm that impacted Maine and the Maritimes. Quieter weather expected, but we will still have some moisture in place, enough to produce some mountain snowfall here. Good for the ski areas, of course, right on through the weekend, but relatively quiet across the Northeast this weekend. We're not going to see any notable weather. It'll just be chilly right on into next week. Looking down south, we are going to see some shower activity here moving through North Florida and southern Georgia. No severe weather expected out of this. And relatively light to moderate rain stretching across northern and central parts of the peninsula. But by the time this gets south tomorrow, it's primarily just going to be cloud cover and some spotty showers from the Space Coast on down into the Bahamas and into the southeastern portion of Florida. Really not a big deal at this point. It stays kind of cloudy, though. But as we get into next week, we should start to see some drier air moving down. Looking at the larger scale here, the blues indicate much below average heights and temperatures aloft, whereas the reds indicate strong areas of high pressure and above average temperatures. You'll see while Alaska and the western United States are going to remain above average, we're going to continue to have this persistent flow of cold over the eastern United States. This is next Tuesday on the 3rd, and we see yet another push coming right behind it on the 4th and 5th. So at this point, it shuts down everything coming across the southern part of the country. You can see there's a little bit of unsettled weather here, but it's pretty much stuck underneath this massive ridge in here, and that's going to keep things in check across the western United States and in the deep south. What will happen is all of our air comes in from the polar region here, and so that keeps the chances for a big storm pretty much away from the eastern United States. That doesn't, of course, account for lake effect snow. We will have plenty of that, but we will definitely not have a big-time storm coming up the East Coast. This cold may relax a little bit by the end of next weekend. You can see a massive ridge building into the northwest. And as a result, with the ridge off the East Coast, ridge in the west, we will have another wave of cold to follow around the 10th and 11th and maybe right on into the 14th. This could be interesting here, by the way, when we get 2 weeks out. And again, it's 2 weeks out, so don't trust it too much. But you can see we finally trade in this big trough here of colder, unsettled air in the east for milder air, but we've got much more unsettled weather in the west. This could set up a battleground for some more action here for winter weather, for heavy rain, and severe weather. So that's something we're going to have to keep an eye on towards the middle of December. I like to look at the teleconnections here. I'll just explain this to you real quick. The green is what we're tracking. The blue is a control, but the green is the mean. And you can see the Arctic oscillation is negative and it will stay near the zero mark, but it does eventually become more positive once we get closer to Christmas time. So with respect to average, I don't think it's going to be as cold towards the Christmas holiday across the eastern United States or for much of the country, maybe for the West. But right now, our real cold is basically over the next 5 days, and then things moderate a little bit, and we kind of go into a back and forth. Now, the North Atlantic oscillation, this is highly negative right now, meaning we have high pressure over Greenland, allowing colder air to come into the east. That eventually does trend more towards positive. It's the transition zone, though, when things could get interesting. And here, as that NAO gets closer to zero and into the positives, that's sometimes when we have a signal for a storm, which will put us at the middle of next week. But there's some other factors in play here that aren't necessarily favorable for that to happen. And one is the P&A. This is the Pacific North American Oscillation. It goes positive, which is definitely good for winter weather in the eastern United States, but the other teleconnections are not favorable. So we're kind of at odds here between do we get the cold air to come south, and then do we get the moisture to come up the East Coast? And right now the two are kind of clashing with each other. So the idea of a big storm coming up the east right now is not looking too great, which is good if you have travel plans. But don't be completely discouraged. We're just starting meteorological winter here on Sunday. I mean, we've got 3 months or more of this to go, so things can very quickly change. All right, well, that's a guessing game. Anybody knows that I've done this for a while. Seasonal forecasts are often wrong. They're just not easy to forecast. But the cold is certainly going to be here. And you can see on the GFS model here, lots of lake effect snow. We do have this storm system tomorrow that tracks into Missouri and then tomorrow night into the Ohio Valley. But it's quick hitting and then it's out of here. More cold air comes behind it. We'll see a clipper system towards the middle of the week. And this one we do need to watch in the Northeast. But interestingly, if you look on the GFS here, you see this green here around the Great Lakes. So the areas getting the lake effect snow now are actually going to warm up once the system comes through. This clipper comes through. It's actually going to reverse the cold and allow temperatures to warm up. So we'll get some rain on top of that snow, but not going to be long lasting. Behind that, it turns cold again. And here comes the lake effect later next week. You can see this is looking pretty nasty here for the Northeast and the Great Lakes. If you're in the big cities right now, cold and wind, but really nothing more than that. I just don't anticipate this being a favorable track for any kind of winter storm. Everything is displaced farther to the east. And next weekend remains chilly, but we are going to see moderation. Now, after that, when temperatures do moderate and we start to see more action coming in across the southern part of the jet, we could see more severe weather over the southern United States early the following week of the 9th. We could also see some form of winter system, but right now it's really a guessing game to see who in this area is going to get what. But just something to keep in mind if you're in Tennessee or Kentucky or even in the Carolinas, North Georgia, you can see the GFS trying to get some snow all the way into North Georgia here on the month of the night or the night of the 9th. And even into the 10th, it does show a winter storm here, but this can change quite a bit. But this is the beginning of a transition, as you can see, towards the week of the 10th or the 11th in that time frame. Here's a European model from earlier. It's not going to look a lot different in the shorter term, as you all can see here. Just a relatively quiet pattern. You can see the rain coming in through the Great Lakes next Wednesday and Thursday, and then followed by another shot of cold and lake effect. The 9th and 10th, we do have a system moving into the eastern U.S. Again, it could be unsettled down south. What happens in the Mid-Atlantic and Tennessee Valley is still to be determined. But this is something that has some winter storm potential for it in parts of the interior of the Northeast. So we are going to have to certainly keep a closer watch on that. And finally, the Canadian operational model. It's not going to look a lot different in the shorter term here. Here comes the Clipper. Again, we don't see a big difference. It's a little slower with the Clipper than the other two models, but that's really about it. You can see it follows with a pretty nasty, brutal shot of cold in eastern Canada and New England late next week. And then temperatures gradually warm up. And as they do so, we have to deal with more systems coming through the Great Lakes. But we are going to watch this moisture down south here for the week of the 9th, 10th, and 11th, as things certainly could get a little bit more interesting at that point. Here's a look at some ensemble snow totals for you all just over the next, say, 15 days. And it's very clear where all the nasty weather is going to be. The Great Lakes region, eastern and central Canada, and the mountains of British Columbia. But across the southern U.S., this is pretty much not yet winter weather for us. Across the midsection of the country, we're going to have some, but it will all depend on storm track. And then across the west, we see a break from the heavy amounts of snow, except in the far northern mountains here around the Glacier Park area. We are going to track some accumulating snow here later tonight, moving into the Kansas City area, and certainly during the morning tomorrow. And the Conchera ratio is a little bit high from what's actually going to stick to the grass, but you can see locally up to 8 or so inches tracking right along the I-70 and just north of the I-70 corridor here. So how much of this actually sticks, you can see it's going to be less, maybe 5 or 6 inches in the morning tomorrow. But you can see it does track across southern Illinois here towards the evening hours. And you will see totals do come down, but south of Indianapolis, Evansville, Santa Claus, Indiana, all the way over towards Louisville, we do have the potential to see at least an inch of new snow, mainly on the grass here overnight tonight and first thing tomorrow. Looking farther east, you'll see the totals do come down here as we get into the nighttime hours, but somebody here could pick up a couple of inches of snow. The mountains are going to have snow this morning or this afternoon, but primarily going to be a nighttime event here, and then things do fade as we get into Sunday. Speaking of the mountains, we have some big snow totals coming tonight in the West Virginia Appalachians here. We could see amounts over 18 inches in the same places that got hit last week. But with the next system that comes in here, this is not a huge event, but from Parkersburg on down, all the way to near Huntington, towards Kanawha County here, towards places like Mingo and Hurricane, we will see about an inch or so of snow here tomorrow night. and early in the day on Sunday. That could cause some road issues if you're heading to church early on Sunday. So keep that in mind. But this system isn't going to last for too long. By the time we get to Sunday night, it is going to fade. So that's what we're looking at here. Looking at lake effect, this is where the bigger problems are. And I think these folks are used to it, but it's going to be a lot of snow. Take a look at how much snow here falls through tomorrow afternoon or through Sunday afternoon. You can see locally up to 30 inches here coming off of Lake Superior, about 11 inches in Marquette, quite a bit here on the Keweenaw as well. And northern lower Michigan is going to see a lot of snowfall out of this. Through Sunday evening, here's the official forecast from the Marquette office, and you can see 6 to 12 on the Keweenaw here, a little bit more towards Ironwood, a little snow in northern parts of Wisconsin, but the big amounts are favored to be over the eastern half of the UP, as much as 30 inches around Sault Ste. Marie, and into lower Michigan, potentially 1.5 feet in the Gaylord area, and you can see that here as well. Now, the Gaylord office doesn't go through Sunday. They'll get a little bit more, but you can see 3 to 5 inches around Cadillac. Traverse City could see a few inches here. Alpena, not that much, but even the Thumb will pick up a little bit of snow out of this. Farther south, and this is a shorter term forecast, we could see a few inches around Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, Ada, St. Joe's, Muskegon, all the way over to near Jackson, lesser amounts towards Lansing. So college football games this weekend, we'll have a little bit of snow on the ground for that. Not a big deal, I don't think, but it will be substantial enough here. Now, here's where our problems are going to be. In western and upstate New York, we are going to see a ton of snow. You can see in just the next 60 hours, locally 60 inches on the Tug Hill here. And in places like Dunkirk and in the south towns, south of Buffalo, quite a bit of snow, maybe 3 feet, will accumulate. This does clip the Cleveland area, but north and east of Cleveland, obviously, a much better shot at accumulation. We go from around an inch or two in Cleveland all the way up to 15 inches in Mentor to almost 28 in Ashtabula. And this is ending Saturday around lunchtime. Erie, northeast PA, some of you up there are going to pick up closer to 30 inches of snow. Even farther south, Edinburgh, those areas could pick up close to a foot of snow. And the big numbers are going to be in places like Watertown, where we see locally over 5 feet of snow in just the next couple of days. Even Pulaski, quite a bit. Oswego could see a few inches. But the interesting part about this lake effect is that these bands are not going to be super wide, so there will be a huge gradient in snow totals. And where that band is most persistent, we are going to get clobbered. But north and south of there, we may only get a little bit of snow. South of Buffalo, 6 inches. Orchard Park could get a foot or two. But Dunkirk, southern parts of Erie County, right along the lakeshore, right around 90 here, we're talking some major totals here through the rest of this weekend, which will shut things down. So where this differs from what happened around Christmas in 2022 is that these are going to be bands of snow that don't have incredible wind with them, unlike that system. That was on the back end of low pressure that had incredibly strong winds with it. This is not going to be a blizzard, but it is going to be a whiteout for many folks in these bands. So that's what we're going to be tracking for you here. In the longer term, we have our feature here moving through the Ohio Valley on Sunday. We get a break. We have a Clipper-type system here, middle of next week. Not a lot of snow, but there'll be some. But the Northeast doesn't see a ton outside of the mountains here through the end of next week. You can see the ensemble tries to bring a couple of sneakier storms a little bit farther south next weekend. I'm not really buying that, but the chances may be a little bit better towards the 10th and 11th here. But the cold is the story at this point, not the snow. Speaking of cold, you can see aloft where things are going to be really cold here early next week in the mid-Atlantic. We get some moderation, but not a lot. It'll stay cold in the Northeast later next week. The South does warm up here at the end of next week before the next wave of cold comes down. And it doesn't really reach all the way down into Florida. It's more the mid-Atlantic and the mid-South. But behind our next system here, around the 10th and 11th, it does get cold again. After that, though, things could warm up more substantially for the second weekend of the month of December. Here's a look at our forecast highs for today. Pretty chilly, but nothing brutal at this point. They come up a little bit tomorrow and into Sunday before our next wave of cold comes back down. So you see like Birmingham's 48 today, then into the 50s tomorrow and Sunday, but then back into the 40s here for Monday and Tuesday. We do see some warm-up coming into places like Texas and Oklahoma here towards the middle of next week. But definitely farther east is where you'll be feeling the cold more. Record low high possible here in eastern parts. I think this is Zanesville in Ohio, about 30 degrees. Still warm in South Florida today. Tomorrow we start to cool it down about 10 degrees and really chilly here on Sunday and Monday across areas where it'll be snowing. We could have some record low highs across places like Hazard, Kentucky, and Beckley, West Virginia. Only 27 is the high on Monday. So we're not breaking tons of records, but we are persisting with the cold. And if you look at those overnight lows in particular here, you can see the cold does advance. Let me take that back one for you here. You can see the cold does advance. We don't set a lot of records out of it, but Western North Carolina, East Tennessee, where a lot of folks are without homes, we are going to be well down into the teens. Those higher elevations could drop into the single digits. And I'm most concerned for that happening on Tuesday morning, but it stays cold Wednesday with some warming coming on Thursday. By the way, if you're in Florida, we may Tuesday morning get down to places just north of I-4, getting down about 38 degrees. So a frost threat is there just north and west of Orlando, just north of the Tampa Bay area on Tuesday morning. Still cold Wednesday, and then slowly warming up for next Thursday. So not a lot of crazy stuff to talk about, but I'm a meteorologist. I'm not going to ignore what's going on out there, even if it's not busy for everybody. And I thank you all for your time today. I hope everybody enjoyed your holiday and that you travel safely if you are doing that this weekend. I'll try to be back on here for tomorrow. I don't think a lot's going to change, but fresh information, maybe something does change. But as always, I appreciate you all's time today. And I want to give all the thanks and all the credit to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, who has given me this avenue here to share the good news with you all. The weather is not always good news, but the news that Jesus is coming again is the news that excites me and gives me the hope to be able to do this every day. Psalm 95 says, NIV says, "Come, let us sing for the joy to the Lord. Let us shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before him with thanksgiving and extol him with music and song. For the Lord is the great God, the great King above all gods. In this hand are the depths of the earth, and the mountain peaks belong to him. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. Come, let us bow down and worship. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker, for he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, the flock under his care." The Lord cares for all of us here, not just those that believe necessarily in the good news that Jesus has in fact been risen from the dead, resurrected, so that eternally, if you accept Jesus to be the Savior, you will live eternally. But he is good to everybody. He has created this earth. We wouldn't be here without any of that, obviously. But Thanksgiving is, I think, the theme here is to truly give credit where credit is due. And I know when I get with my family and it's a time to get a break from work and just to have a little bit of rest, I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that election season is pretty much over here. I'm thankful that the holidays are coming, cold weather's coming, but I'm most thankful for my Lord and Savior. And I wanted to share that good news with you today because I hope it encourages at least one person who's watching me this afternoon, because just know that you matter, that God created you and he cares a lot about you. And whether or not there's evil going on that affects you, there are going to be challenges, but God can help you fight those battles. You don't have to do it yourself. And that's what I tried to do before I was a Christian. I tried to fight every battle myself, and it led to all kinds of issues. Just made me feel pretty hopeless. But today, I stand with you in full hope that there are good times ahead and that eternal life is eternal. I hope you all have a great Friday, and I'll catch you tomorrow. God bless you.